You've been hanging around the Met for, what, 16, 17 years now, I guess?
17 years, right. 1971 was my debut.
What does the company mean to you? After all, you sing everywhere. What is special for you about the Met?
Well, for me, the Met naturally is home. I mean, I grew up at the Met, and as far as I'm concerned, there's no opera company in the world quite like it. Of course, it sounds like somebody, well, it's his home company, and of course he would say that, but in traveling all over the world and seeing how other opera companies operate, I have to say without any bias that the Metropolitan is the greatest opera company in the world. Any opera company, there are always problems and politics and whatever, but as far as the well-oiled machinery is concerned, the Met is head and shoulders above all the others as far as I'm concerned.
Jim, when you say you grew up at the Met, do you mean you grew up listening to the Met broadcast? You grew up as an artist working at the Met?
Well, both. I mean, thanks to the Texaco broadcasts on Saturday and everything, of course, I grew up listening to it. But it was shortly after I made my debut in opera. It was only a few years after that I was at the Met. I debuted there when I was 23 years old. So all of my maturing and my growing up in the business has been done at the Metropolitan Opera, with stints away from the Met singing other places. But the Met has always formed the core, the basis of my career.
So when you started, you were 23 at the Met, and I think The King and Aida was your first role.
That's right, yeah.
So you had to put on a good deal of makeup for that one,
yes,
didn't you?
Indeed.
What sort of roles give you the greatest pleasure? We've heard you now in the new Met production of Rheingold, and coming up is Tales of Hoffmann. What, very different roles.
Very different. I mean,
what do you like best?
Well, that's one of the things I like about my voice category, the bass-baritone category, is that you do get to do such a varied repertoire as far as the music is concerned, the characters. But my favorite roles have always been Don Giovanni and Faust. But now I've added to that list quite a bit with the Wagnerian repertoire since I've gotten into that. And Wotan, I think, is probably my favorite role, ranks right up there with Giovanni and Faust and Hoffmann. I love Hoffmann because that enables me to portray 4 different characters in the course of one evening, and it's always a challenge, and it's a great deal of fun. I prefer very heavy acting roles with a lot of physical things rather than just standing and singing. Except for the Wagner. The Wagner, you don't go jumping around the stage too much, but
But you stay there a lot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is a long, demanding.
That's the hardest thing about Wagner is the standing. It's a very famous story. I'm sure you know, and I'm sure all the listeners know about Birgit Nielsen when someone came up to her one time and asked what advice she had because this person was going to be studying Tristan and Isolde, and did they have any advice? And she said, get comfortable shoes, because that's what it is. But the Wagner, all the emotion is inside, and you read the emotion on the people's faces and in very small reactions, whereas a lot of the Italian operas is very, what I want to say, very outside of the body. You make a lot of gestures and do a lot of things all over the stage for the acting.
As I recall, Thomas Stewart was bothered not by the length of the role or comfortable shoes, but the spear. He said, to go around holding that spear for hours.
That can be a pain. That can be a real pain. You don't want to look like you're holding it in one hand all night long, and it's always getting in the way. And if you have anything else to fool with, it's. But after doing it for a couple of years, you get used to it.
Jim Morris, one of the things that we, I guess, not infrequently hear is that somebody went into Wagner and killed him because the demands were too heavy and the singing out and the huge orchestra and the rest of it. How do you avoid that trap? I mean, when you go into Wagner, how do you avoid sort of over-singing or over-pushing or whatever else?
Well, I've been very lucky because through the course of my career, I've had very good guidance right from the beginning with my first voice teachers, Rosa Poncel among them, and they were always very concerned about me not doing too much too soon and not getting into the heavy repertoire too soon. And I've always had a large voice, and as I've gotten older, it, naturally has gotten more mature, as voices do. And I saved the Wagner until just in the last couple of years, and when I felt that I was mature enough to get into it. And also the approach to the singing. I like to approach the Wagner like I approach the Italian operas, in a very bel canto way. It's a story that I've told many times, but several years ago at the Met, my first season at the Met, I was asked to cover King Mark in Tristan and Isolde. And I went in for coachings, and I was completely tied up in knots, not for the vocal aspect, but the Germanic approach to the singing, the Germanic style and the language. And with breaking the words all up and the Sprechstimme, So I asked to please be taken off of the part because I felt that it was going to do me harm. So they did. They were very nice. And so just a few years ago when I started in the Wagner, I'd always had this concept in my mind that this is the way German had to be sung, very, very broken up, very cut up, very, I hate to say the word barked, but, a lot of it, that's the way people refer to it. And so when I had my first session with Hans Hotter on Die Walküre, I thought I had the pronunciation down perfectly and the style and everything, and I went to him and I sang about half a page, and he put his hands up to his head and he said, no, bel canto, sing Italian, bel canto. I thought, oh my God, 20 years I've been thinking the wrong thing. And so I feel very fortunate that my background has been in the bel canto, the French and Italian operas, and that's what I try to bring to the Wagner, and I find that it's not harmful at all to the voice. Also, Hans warned me that in Wagner there are certain places where you're never going to be heard, regardless of what you do, and so don't even worry about it. So I leave it up to the conductor to make the balances, and I just try not to kill myself.
Well, Jim Morris, you have sort of brought up two legendary names. Another occasion, I hope you'll come back and talk to us about Hans Hotter and Rosa Poncel.
I'll be glad to.
But meanwhile, we are delighted to have had you here returning to the Met Marathon. We look forward to the performances of Hoffmann, not only in the House, but on January 2nd. That'll be the broadcast, and live from the Met telecast on March 2nd. So, many thanks again.